Hey, it's Joe with Jolie Farms, and we've got a great video for you today. We're going to be introducing my friend Nick Vasey of Instacasa. Got a great interview with him. It's about a 20-minute interview, but please watch it all the way to the end because I think you're going to learn a lot about real estate and building here in Ecuador. Hi, welcome to Jolie Farms. We're here today in Conversation Corner with our friend Nick Vasey, and we're going to talk a little bit to Nick. Nick, can you tell us how long you've lived here in Vilcabamba?
I came to Vilcabamba in about mid-2008, actually.
And where are you originally from?
I'm kind of a mongrel, an Australian Brit, who jetted about the world and did a lot of travelling for a long time. I left Australia in about 91 originally, and didn't go back there for about 12 or 13 years. And then I did go back there, kind of as a personal test to see what that would be like, and also to visit my mother at the time. And I had to cut my hair off. I went back into suits and ties, went back into corporate for a little while, and it was kind of interesting, definitely challenging to go back to that kind of scene after all that time away. But it turned out that I could do it, but I just didn't like it. So I upped and left again 4 or 5 years later, which was 2008 by then, and decided that I wanted to relocate myself somewhere outside of the Matrix, and that ended up being in Vilcabamba.
In Vilcabamba, fantastic. Nick, tell our viewers what you do for a living here in Vilcabamba.
Since I got to Vilcabamba, I didn't know actually what I was going to be doing in Vilcabamba when I first got here. I came with my ex-wife now, and we actually started off helping a couple of people who were building an eco-retreat, which is now very, very famous, which is called Montesueños. That was Brian and Meredith, and we basically helped them kick that off, got them off the ground, helped them with a lot of practical stuff, helped them with a lot of tech stuff, and that was the first 3 or 4 months of our lives here in Vilcabamba before I found my way into what has kept me very busy for coming up 15 years now, which is real estate. We started off a company called the Vilcabamba Real Estate Company, and we have been licensed, continuously licensed, since 2009. And 3 or 4 years ago, we started doing some prefabricated modular homes as well. So we changed the name of the company from Vilcabamba Real Estate Company to Instacasa Ecuador. And that Instacasa umbrella, under that we now have the original real estate business, the construction business that we do, and the transportable modular homes themselves. So all those 3 businesses are now nestled under Instacasa.
Fantastic. Nick, and you mentioned that you've been continually licensed as a realtor here in Ecuador. As I understand it, realtors here tend to call themselves realtors even though they're not licensed. And it is kind of somewhat legal to not be licensed here?
It's going to take a little while to go down that rabbit hole. But basically, when I first got here, it was the Wild West, very much the Wild West. And some of the stories that came to me at that time were truly just, I just couldn't believe the stories that I was hearing. And eventually, and there was so many of them so quickly, I just thought, what's going on here? Why are these people telling me all this stuff? And then I realized that perhaps this is an opportunity, because there was so many terrible things happening to people, and dodgy stuff being undertaken by some real operators at that time in this valley, that I thought, if I find a good real estate partner, excuse me, first of all, and then set up a a real business, play a straight game, we should be able to have a great business in no time at all. And that's exactly what happened. We set up Vilcabamba Real Estate Company. I found an excellent business partner. I was super lucky to find this gentleman by the name of Santiago Rodriguez, and he and I have now been business partners for coming up 15 years, which here in Vilcabamba, if you look around and you know what's happened to a few businesses and people here, and certainly in the real estate game, is nothing short of miraculous. So I feel very lucky that I found the right partner straight off the bat, and that we're still doing great business together nearly 15 years later.
And I know Santiago quite well, and his mother and his brother, Jose, and wonderful people. I think I've mentioned them before in maybe our tour around the square in Vilcabamba. But yes, Nick, you're right. What a great find Santiago
Yeah, he's a blessing. There's no doubt about it. Speaks 3 languages, has been all over the place, and has an innate knowledge of what goes on in this valley, and especially when it comes to dealing with the intricacies of some of the things that you need to be aware of when you're trying to get ahead of the game in terms of figuring out whether the property that you're looking at is viable or not. There are a lot of tips, tricks and traps, I guess is the best way to put it. And Santiago is fantastic at ferreting out any potential issues. So,
Nick, if you had to tell our viewers who are thinking about maybe relocating to Ecuador and Vilcabamba specifically, if you were to tell them 3 things that they need to take into consideration, what would that be?
I have watched like thousands of people over the many years here come down here and do a variety of interesting, entertaining, and frankly insane things. So it's a good question. Very simple recommendations. If you're going to come down to Ecuador or Vilcabamba or any other kind of country where you're stepping out of your comfort zone, maybe the culture, the language, so on and so forth, if you're thinking about relocating, the most important thing is to rent. Rent for 3 months, 6 months, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And talk to a lot of people. Don't sort of shut yourself off from speaking to certain people because you heard something from someone. You know, talk to them and then you have to make your own assessment, and you have to get enough dots to be able to join together to be able to get an accurate picture of what you're really dealing with there. And there is just no substitute for living in the place for a while. It may be for you, it may be not for you for reasons that you could never have you could have never ascertained those reasons ahead of time without the experience, without the lived experience. So that would be the main one, I would say. The second one would be in a real estate context. We're talking real estate. So the second one would be dealing with not only licensed people, but reputable people. And that takes us back around again to talking widely in the community. Vilcabamba is a small town, and eventually all you have in this place is your reputation. And I'm very proud to be able to hold my head up high there and say that if you go to the Google business reviews for Instacasa, we not only have 5 or 6 or 7 times as many reviews as the next one down the ladder, but they're all 5-star reviews. We have countless testimonials, and essentially you can't hide yourself, what you are, and how you've conducted yourself over time in a place like Vilcabamba, or any small town, anywhere, really. And at the end of the day, like I said, your reputation is everything, and you have to guard it ferociously. And I think we've done that.
I would agree with everything you've said so far, and I think there are a lot of people right now who are buying property sight unseen from other countries. I think that's a terrible idea. Because I think when you get here, there's some things, if you're used to a international standard of building, you're not going to find that necessarily in Vilcabamba. It can be had if you build new, but the existing structures and Ecuadorian construction are going to be a lot different than a United States standard or European standard. So I think buying sight unseen presents some problems, wouldn't you say?
I think that's only happened twice with us, and one of those purchases really became a problematic thing for the people who just had no idea what they were doing. Our job is really to bridge, I guess, the expectation gap and the lack of experience and the lack of knowledge that the newcomers coming here have, and try to build a bridge between what's in their head and what the reality is, and hopefully those things are going to be able to meet at some point with some adaptation along the way from those people, culturally, socially, expectations with respect to quality of building and so on and so forth. There are many, many things that people have to consider, and I guess if there's a takeaway, we don't charge anyone anything for them to come in and have a conversation with us. In fact, it's something that I could have saved over the years. We could have saved many people a great deal of heartache and pain and financial loss, for example, if they'd just come and knocked on our door or said, can we catch up for a coffee, or if they found something that's interesting, a property or whatever, and they should have come and got our opinion on that thing. We would have just given them an honest opinion, and then they can do whatever they like. But it's so frustrating sometimes, because if the people don't come to you and ask you, you can't really help them. So that would be something that I would strongly recommend for anyone coming to Vilcabamba, whether it's me or whether it's my business partner Santiago. Just give us a holler. We'll meet you downtown. We'll have a coffee and shoot the breeze and answer any questions that you have. Because after 15 years of doing this, there's not much that we don't know about how this valley ticks and talks.
Yeah, I would say that renting for 6 months is a great idea. Rent here is cheap, and this country has so many microclimates. You can go 15 minutes in any direction and experience something quite a bit different.
Absolutely.
Where we are compared to downtown Vilcabamba, we're almost 10 degrees Fahrenheit cooler up here. You can probably feel it right now. It's cooler
absolutely.
here. So, we get down, pretty low at night, and, in Vilcabamba, it can get quite warm and humid. So a little bit different environment. I think it's really wise to rent, but if your situation is such that you need to buy a property right away, some people do that for visa reasons, for investment visa, and there's different kinds of visas, and Isabel Mascara, my friend, can go all through that with you and discuss the different options. But I think that really getting to know the area and making sure this is the area of Vilcabamba, the area of Ecuador you want to live in. Vilcabamba has a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of barrios, and you can be down by the river, you can be up in the mountains like we are. So there's a varied landscape here.
Yeah, I mean, just for people talking about Ecuador generally, there are essentially three regions on mainland Ecuador, and that's the coast, the Sierra where we are, and the jungle. Very, very few people go to the jungle. That's like less than 1%. And so you've got a choice between the coast and the Sierra. On the coast, you're obviously at sea level. It's hot. It's humid. It's not for everybody. There's, a lot of bugs, a lot of weird stuff going on out on the coast. There's some great stuff going on out on the coast as well. And I know I have a lot of friends that live out there. But if you decide to live in the Sierra, at least you can kind of modulate your experience climatically by deciding how high you live and where you live in various mountain regions here. As Joe said, the microclimates are many and varied, and so you should be able to find something that's good for you, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think, I'm remembering a friend of mine who really likes it warm, Well, he would probably be better suited on the coast where it's nice and warm. But I think that for us, I spent my lifetime in Texas, and it's just absolutely too warm for there anymore, for me. But here it's just perfect. We're almost a constant 73 degrees here at our home. It'll go up on a really warm day to 80, but most of the time, 73, 75, that's where we sit. We love that. For some people, that might be too cold. So individual preference for climate, etc., will come into play. We feel extremely blessed that we found the place that we found here. it wasn't without a couple small surprises, but it was nothing that we can't live without. I really recommend that you make sure that you have water sources that you're going to look at for the property, at least one and hopefully two water sources. And then also electricity. You know, unless you're planning on being off-grid and doing solar. I know someone who bought a piece of land here in Vilcabamba, and to install electricity would have been as much as the property cost. So that's a terrible surprise to have happen.
Yeah, just on that note, a point that I should have made before actually. Before we even list the property on our website, we jump it through a comprehensive list of due diligence, such that we're not going to get any surprises later. And I guess that's one of the major differences between the cowboy operators in this place and professionals, is that we do some of the hard yards up front to the level that's necessary to make sure that if somebody comes and wants to buy that property, we're not going to run into any kind of problems that we wouldn't already have seen. And some of the other cowboys, they just like list any old thing at any old price. They don't do any work, any homework at all in terms of due diligence, and then those people who are interested in that property end up paying for it one way or another. So
That's true.
That's a good point.
I think enlisting someone like Nick is well worth the money in the long run, because I think it'll help you avoid so many pitfalls. And there's many here. There's probably like anywhere in Texas. If you don't do due diligence there are some laws to protect you there, but by the same token, you can wind up in a lot of trouble no matter what country that you're buying property in. Laws are different here in Ecuador. We're more of a civil law here, where the U.S. is a common law. So things are different.
Yeah, people need to really realize that once they're down here, Kansas has gone bye-bye. The world is very different down here. It is very much buyer beware. And, you know, if you choose a bad builder and because they offered you a cheap price, and then the first rainy season your house falls down and you're getting upset about it, then you should only be upset at yourself, because you were still operating in a paradigm that no longer exists, and you don't have the protections that you might have had elsewhere. Whereas if you'd asked around, if you'd checked the work that they've done before, seen if they've got any happy clients, blah, 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 then you probably wouldn't have stepped into that hole in the first place. And that's what I was getting at before, in terms of really having to do your own homework. You're under your own recognizance, and the onus is on you to get it right. And the way that you do that is by talking to professional people and getting around in the village and finding out who has done this before and who has done it well and who has a reputation that's worth something. That's the best way that I can put it, really.
Yeah, and I think, due diligence really is the word. And if you're dealing with a builder, leave no stone unturned. Ask them every possible question. Leave no vague responses. Make sure you know exactly what you're getting, and be very clear. The clearer you can be, the better. Sometimes with a language barrier, that may make it a little more difficult. If you speak Spanish fluently, then it's probably not an issue for you.
On that point, one of the reasons that we've had a lot of success with the construction here is because we have a team. Actually, we have two. We're not always using two, but we have two good teams, and the team is important here in Ecuador. But we have one person, and that's almost always Santiago, who is the project manager of the construction and that team. And so he is the single point of contact for the client. So the client, maybe they don't have Spanish, they don't know where to get anything, they don't know what things cost, and trying to coordinate any kind of construction, even in your own country, when you do know all that stuff, is like hell on wheels. But if you're trying to do it here, it's just going to be a disaster. So the single interface whereby the client communicates their vision to, say, Santiago, and then Santiago manifests that vision with the team, and that gets updated, and there's regular meetings whereby the vision that has been communicated to Santiago is indeed the thing that eventually gets manifested. But the main point there is that the client themselves really only has one point of contact, and that's it. So that simplifies things with respect to the knowledge of how things go, the cultural differences, the language barrier, all of that stuff just disappears because Santiago's managing it. So.
Fantastic. Well, we will, in the description box beneath this video, we'll have Nick's contact information, email, phone number, etc. So if you have further questions, you can get a hold of Nick and ask those questions, and he'll be glad to help you, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Was there anything else? Or are we at the...
We've covered it, I think.
We've covered it? Okay, well, I wish you all luck out there if you decide to come down to Ecuador. It's a fantastic country. I've been here 15 years and I'm not going anywhere. So if you get down to Vilcabamba, hit us up for a coffee and we'll have a chat.
Sounds great. If you've enjoyed our video today and you found it helpful, we hope you'll give us a thumbs up and maybe even consider hitting that subscribe button.